Thank you for taking time out to do this interview. I appreciate it.
Of course, I'm happy to be here.
So let's start with how your journey began. What is it about filmmaking that inspires you?
That's a great question. I think it just goes back to being a kid. My father, although not like a big movie guy, was always watching movies. And so anytime I'd like come out into the living room, he had the VHS going and he's watching, Star Wars or Indiana Jones or something like that. A lot of Spielberg films, a lot of Peter Jackson films. And so I would sit and watch with him. And just as the years went on, I just really developed a fascination for like how movies are made. I remember I think it was the first time I watched the behind the scenes for The Lord of the Rings and just realizing how many people were involved in so many different departments. And so my interests kind of started to peak there. And so as I entered high school and I started making film and realizing again just how many people go into just one project, but the gratification of creating something and it's like a team effort. And so I really think that's where it came from, just the collaboration on such a large scale.
So when was your first experience of creating your first film?
First film, I would say it was in high school. In my senior year, I did take a filmmaking class with a couple friends, many of whom I actually still work with today, funny enough. But these assignments we had were, unfortunately, they weren't very like, they were creatively, like they were limited. I think that's the best way of putting it. It was very much like, make this kind of film. And so we were kind of bothered by that. And so we would kind of try to have fun with it. We'd bend the rules, we'd make something fun. And I don't think the teacher appreciated it very much because, they wanted a very specific film. But we're like, no, that's boring. So we'll do a documentary, but we're going to do it our way. And so we kind of, yeah, we broke the rules just to kind of make it fit. But then that teacher ended up being swapped out with another teacher in like the last semester of the year. And he was very much like, make whatever you want. And so that's when we were like, cool. And we started putting a little bit more effort in and exploring more avenues. And, of course, we're 17, 18, and we're thinking we're making the greatest stuff on the planet. And then I think a couple months ago, we found a hard drive with some of the movies and we're just sitting there like, wow, we really hope that this never surfaces because this stuff's really bad. It is not good at all. It did not age well. So,
So let's talk about your new film, the Starlight Motel.
yes.
Where did the concept come from in creating this film?
So Starlight originally was part of a much bigger project. I worked with a couple of local filmmakers here, and we came up with the idea to do an anthology film. And we all really liked the idea of having a branching character in different stories that were all in the same location but took place in different decades. And it was called Grey Witch Chronicles. It was a very ambitious project that I still hope one day we can put together. But there were four writers on it, and we each chose a decade. And I was directing it, and so I was like, I'm going to use my power here. I'm going to claim the '80s because I loved '80s films growing up, and so I knew I wanted to create something in the '80s. And so, we pretty much had free reign. It's like make whatever you want, just horror related, and it has to feature this one character in some capacity. And I just knew I wanted to make aliens because I feel like aliens, the classic gray alien concept is kind of scary. And I
Yeah.
don't think a lot of movies like to like actually utilize it. If they do aliens, they're these insect-like creatures or they look very different. They're not humanoid. And so I knew I wanted to do something creepy with gray aliens, base it here in New Mexico, but also have like its own style to it and also pay homage to the '80s films that I grew up watching. A lot of those horror films like The Evil Dead, Killer Clowns from Outer Space, The Thing. So I really wanted to kind of base it in the '80s, have the style of the '80s, but also have unique flair to it, my own style in it.
Well, being that there's the whole concept of aliens and filming in New Mexico, it seems like the perfect
Hmm.
fit. What was it like
Exactly.
getting to film here and taking in that whole experience?
It was really great. I was initially worried when we decided to go ahead and pull Starlight and just do it as its own short, because when you write a script, obviously the limit is your imagination. You can set it anywhere you want. There's no limit to it really. And so when it comes to actually filming it, especially on a low budget, that's when it gets difficult. And so we're sitting there and we're storyboarding it. We're trying to find locations, and I'm really just getting nervous because I'm like, well, it's 1980s. It's a roadside motel in New Mexico.
Hmm.
How are we going to do that on such a low budget? And so Tasha Dunn, who was our locations manager on the project, I gave her the impossible task. I'm like, look, this is what we're looking for. If you can't do it, like, don't stress. It's probably going to be hard. I don't think you'll be able to find it, but if you can, like, you'll save the day. And so I'm thinking, okay, how do we rewrite this? We can't really rewrite it because the hotel is a big, it's the whole plot, like it's the whole centerpiece of the story. And if you change, if you make it an Airbnb or something, it's no longer a 80s film because those weren't a thing back then. So I'm kind of nervous. I'm trying to plan a way of kind of rewriting it. And then Tasha comes back and says, hey, I found a place out in Grants. And as long as we rent rooms, you can film anywhere on the premises. And so I feel like that's when the stars aligned. I'm like, okay, this is actually going to work. And then we scheduled it, and the owner of the motel, a guy that goes by Kim, very nice guy. He's actually an ex filmmaker from South Korea, I believe. And so he was really excited to have us there. And it was just I'd never growing up in New Mexico for whatever reason I've never actually stopped in Grants. I'd always driven through it. But that was my first time in Grants, and we made a weekend out of it. We had everybody staying at the motel, and we shot pretty much all day and all night for 2 days, and it was so much fun, and it was great to go out there, and it was right on Route 66 and everything, so it was a lot of fun.
When it comes to the 80s, I feel like there's this element of kooky plus that scary element. I mean, were you going strictly
Hmm.
for that, being that 80s was your go-to and the inspiration of this film, or were you looking to really kind of create almost a Hitchcock type feel with the film?
I think it was the best way of putting it. It was kind of a blend. Like I said, I really wanted that style. I wanted that campiness. Because again, one of my favorite movies is Sam Raimi's The Evil Dead.
Hmm.
It's a scary movie. It's got some really disturbing scenes, but it's a bunch of teenagers out in the woods at a cabin. It's super campy and over the top. I love Bruce Campbell, but the groovy line and stuff. It's super cheesy. And so I knew I wanted to ride that line. I didn't want to go like full in on the cheese, but I wanted to have just that fun kind of throwback feel to it. So when we were making it, it was, and what I noticed, especially through the editing and when we completed the project, is the first half, actually the first, I'd say 3/4 of the film, we have that fun 80s style. But when we get to the final act of the film, the third act, that's when we really were just like, okay, let's kind of pull back from that, make it a little more serious. Let's make it a little more scary. And I'll be honest, from the start, I never envisioned this project as like something that people would watch and be absolutely terrified by. That was never the end, the goal with Starlight. It was more just like a fun throwback film, but still surprise the audience at the end. And one thing I'm very proud of it, we have like two pretty good twists in the movie, and everyone that we've watched it with that hasn't seen it before, they react exactly how I was hoping they would. Like the two big reveals essentially catch them off guard, and that was really awesome to see. So yeah, it's great to see an audience watch it because it's always a really great reaction.
So, how do you feel about being chosen for this year's Dark Red Film Festival?
Super excited. I attended Dark Red last year with the film, and although I've only been to a handful of festivals, I've probably been to about six now. Dark Red is really special. Like they have such great selection. It's very community driven. Like I don't want to speak for them, but I'm willing to bet a huge selection. From what I've seen, a huge selection are local films. They still pull from international and domestic films, but yeah, the selection is very community driven. I know probably 10 or 15 films that are at the festival just because either I've been involved with the production or I know the people that made it. So it's just a great local like networking event for filmmakers because we all get to come and support each other and see what we've been working on. Because sometimes we're working on projects at the same time as other people. So we'll see the pictures, we'll hear about it, but we won't actually get to see it. And so Dark Red acts is a really good way. Like one of our actors in the movie, Brandon Carter, who played Lewis, he has a film in Dark Red that he directed called Movie Monsters, and I never got to see it. So I'm really excited to see that. And then another one of our actors, Caden, has a film playing called The Haunters, and I was AD on that, and that was a great shoot. So I have seen that one, but it's still really cool. Like we're gonna watch it again. I'm excited to see as many films as I can and support everybody because it's just such a great festival that Mason and Tabitha have put together, and it's so much fun to be at. So
So, out of I from the years you've been doing filmmaking, I'm sure that with each project, there's a lesson learned. What did you learn making the Starlight Hotel?
That's a great question. I learned a lot of things, really, but I'd say the most important one was just to trust your vision, to stick with your plan. Because again, it got tough when we were transitioning from pre-production to actually shooting the thing, because the script had been done for like 2 years. I had a casting call for the film 2 years prior, so like I knew everyone I wanted, and luckily we got everybody back. But again, it really came down to like the location and the timing. It was like, okay, how do we realistically do this on our budget? How do we find a location that's going to work? And so I feel like if I didn't trust my gut that it was going to work out and that, like Tosh should be able to find something, and I just started rewriting it, the film that we would have made would have been, it still could have been great, but I know I wouldn't have been as proud of it because it wouldn't have been my original vision. So I think the best thing that came out of this was just sticking it through, working through the hard parts, and giving it all we got. And I think we achieved exactly what I was going for when I wrote it. So it's awesome.
Well, John, thank you for joining me this morning to talk about the movie and the festival. And, we're looking forward, we finally get to attend this year. So I'm really looking forward to
Great.
seeing it. And congratulations on getting chosen.
All right. Thank you. Well, thank you for having me as well. It was great to talk to you, Teresa.